Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Get ready to find your free will from your roots in the stars.
Hi, I'm Sue Rose Minahan, host of Talk Cosmos. And tonight is June 6th, the day after the lunar eclipse on the 5th. And we repeat this on Thursday, the 11th at 6 o'clock in the morning. And this is Pacific time here in the Northwest. And the title for our general subject tonight in this Gemini archetypal time that we're experiencing is Lunar Sagittarius Eclipse, Transmuting USA Beliefs of Justice. This eclipse, I'll just generally discuss before I introduce our guest for our talk today, is an actual penumbral eclipse. And what that is that there's a range of when the moon and earth and sun link up in their alignment. And it needs to link up because it happens with every new moon or full moon. And this is a full moon, meaning it's in the opposite sign of our sun. So it's in Sagittarius. And it happens to be, I'll just also add before I go on to about the meaning of this eclipse astronomically, but it is the south node. The nodes just left. And the nodes, when we speak of the nodes, it's the lunar nodes. They just went into their 18 new month cycle, which they do every 18 months, in south node of Sagittarius and north node of Gemini, and that was in May. So therefore, when the eclipses happen, this lineup of the sun, moon, earth needs to be within a certain degrees of the nodes. And the nodes are this intersection of the moon's path with our sun's ecliptic, and that's the sun's path that we travel in, and we see all the planets traveling from. If it's 12 degrees, it's a total lunar eclipse. And meanwhile, this is not visible all over the world, but yet it is a global experience. We all experience the universe globally. Maybe more specifically, depending on your location or your chart. But if it's within 18 degrees, it can be where the shadow is still occurring. Because shadow, if we're all familiar, is a variable. It's really like twilight and dusk or dawn, you might associate it with, because light and dark can have all shades. It can be very intense shadow, or it can be very mild. And a penumbral, as this is called, is where it's almost like a tea stain over the moon, and it's not always visible yet. The importance of it, which I bring up with Gemini Brett, who's a wonderful astrologer. Just simply Google his name. You'll find a wealth of information, and he relates the sacred astronomy of the sky brought home to Earth for our astrology, is saying that very typically when there's a penumbral eclipse, there's two of them, which there are in our calendar this year. There's the one on the 5th, yesterday, June 5th, and there'll be one on July 4th. And the significant, and they surround, they sandwich, you might say, the solar eclipse, which will be on the 20th, which is also the solstice. Powerful times, just the beginning of significance, which future talks will continue about, and we have been discussing, and of course every astrologer is in some way making reference to. But the point of this is that old shadows, as diluted from our perspective might be, are old shadows, thinking of energetic old shadows, things of obstruction for our purpose, obstructions in the sense that we need to get through to the light, turn on more light to see the visibility, are being released. And we can say released because in this instance, the full moon, the lunar, which it always is associated with the south node of our astrology, is where we're, as a collective, coming from. And something within that needs to be realigned, revisited, reformed. And we do that by encountering and embracing the North Node, which happens to be Gemini, and many significant events, which I will bring up. Just lately, we had the Venus star point, which if you want to learn about it, listen to last week, because we went into depth about that, and as other astrologers. So tonight, I am very glad to introduce again Katherine Metcalf, a professional astrologer, hypnotherapist, an intuitive tarot card reader. Her consultations often specialize, or frequently, in transit and career readings. She teaches astrology and tarot at Blackhawk College, Moline, and I hope I'm saying that right.
Moline, yeah.
Moline, okay, Illinois. And Katherine has been featured on NBC, ABC TV in Phoenix, Arizona. She's been published in Monster, Brides Magazine, Huffington Post, and interviewed by Cosmopolitan Magazine. And every month she hosts a monthly meeting, and which I imagine these days is online, and an astrological and weekly oracle card on YouTube videos. So Katherine is coming from East Moline, Illinois. And if you want to find out about her, it's katherinemetcalf.com, or just simply go to Talk Cosmos, because all the guests are there and I have all the contact information, and you can subscribe too, by the way. That would be just great. And Katherine's been on before. So hello, I am really delighted that you're joining me for this time.
Oh, thank you so much, Sue. It's such a pleasure. And thank you for having me back.
Yeah, we plan to do it. I plan to do it more. I don't know who the we is, but anyway, and I really am glad, because I know that your interest involves the political and the historical, and there's such significance. Because immediately speaking, if we just look at the degrees of this full moon, which happens to be 15 degrees Sagittarius, and then 15 degrees for the sun in
Gemini.
Thank you. In Gemini, that the Sibley chart, which is what's often referred to as the United States chart, and I'll just say for people, on July 4th, 1776, when they declared independence, is listed at 5:10 p.m. in Philadelphia, and our ascendant, which means the rising at the very first house of the chart, is at 12 degrees, just 3 degrees different. So that moon, that full moon energy, the public, is just sitting right in that first house. And we, the public, are speaking our minds, which Sagittarius needs and wants to do. That's its purpose.
Yeah, they're happy to be out there and being vocal.
Yeah, it's so important. And interestingly, it's opposite, looking at the chart, opposite our Mars of action. So that's which is also in line with the sun, which it's just a very activated time. And I'm thinking in many terms, this is energy that will maintain necessarily until resolution, whichever that means. It's, resolutions take coordination. I know here in Seattle, our mayor met with the police chief, who happens to be a woman. Both of them are women here in Seattle.
That's interesting. Yeah.
It is. And the woman police officer is a Black woman, and our mayor is a gay woman. So we, as in the city of Seattle, I think, have a real open attitude of equality on some context. It's always layers, of course.
Yeah, I think
But
you're ahead of the United States in general.
yeah,
With these lunar eclipse lessons. Yeah.
right. But they met and they just agreed no gas. They're not using any gas anymore. They met with the protesters to say, what do you want? And some of them were some of these shifts of police control. So it's a process. I think but looking at this chart with the moon, because lunar eclipses last energetically, for 6 months
At least 6 months. Yeah.
And since it's so close to our ascendant, I think that with the whole story of it, that we're this is the time. This is the time to really work on
make big differences.
Yeah. Making changes.
Yep. Time to absolutely let go of old prejudice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the fact that, like, you're in Illinois, which isn't that far from Minneapolis in some ways, and the Twin City, I'm thinking so often that Gemini, which we're really in that orientation, what with the nodes being in Gemini, North Node,
right,
and the Twin City, Castor and Pollux, where the mortal and the spirit twin, and when the mortal Castor died, no, Pollux died. I'm getting all mixed up.
Castor was the mortal, and
right.
Pollux was the immortal.
I said it right the first time.
You got it.
Oh gosh, my brain's going back and forth too quick. And so of course the spirit Pollux needed to be with him, which really is saying spirit needs to be with the body instead of this fragmentation. And again, Gemini Brett was mentioning that it's like the times are like the messages, because Hermes, Mercury, is the messenger who bringing the deceased to the underworld, and also could be the messenger to, between the spirit world and the mortal world. But it's where it's as though the messages that we're listening to are coming. And I think this was in conjunction with the Venus star point a couple of days ago, that brings heart and mind together, which is a whole energy to unite. That's the purpose. And so it's like these twins talking and saying, no, from the underworld, whether it's George and whether it's Martin Luther King, that I think you're going to bring up too, about the parallels. It's listening to these messages of spirit uniting with heart and spirit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Hermes, the messenger, is related to Gemini, and it's referred to as Mercury as well. So Mercury is the ruling planet of Gemini. So, and I think it's interesting, I have to just say that I'm a Gemini.
Yes.
And you are a Gemini.
Yes.
So we're the good Geminis. And then there's Trump, who's the evil twin. So sorry if I upset your people.
No, well, I must say, and the context of evil, because I always have to, because sometimes I think because I do refrain a little distinction from some religious ideas, but that is where, who's the purpose for? Because in my heart, it is really where we serve the multitudes, really, and listening to the multitudes, and coming to resolutions that have tolerance for both sides, not where one is dominating the other, but it is a collaboration. And again and again and again, you hear this theme from so many. So yes, if we want to express it as evil, that's one context, because language is language. But Gemini does hold
opposites, right?
Yes, it
polar
is.
Opposites, and having to find that middle balance. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was part. Now, in there's so many threads here. And sometimes I think to myself, why worry about the fact that there's so many threads? Because we are Gemini and it's so many connections. Because right off the bat, and I'll name them, there is the chart, because I'm thinking there is the Pluto return coming up, that all of this is sort of signifying. I mean, right now it's at 24 degrees, as we were both mentioning. And of course, our Pluto, I think, in the second house is 27, but it moves so slowly. It's 248 years before it makes its return. So it's going to still be in a year and a half, or maybe 2 years.
Yeah, I think it's 2024.
Yeah, so it's quite a few years actually off when that Pluto returns. So incrementally, we're coming to big shifts of purging, transmuting, and reforming, just tossing out and grabbing and looking at our old shadows, which is, we were founded with many glorious intentions, but also real problems. I mean, the world is not perfect, right?
Right.
Be mature and understand that.
Right, absolutely.
We took the country.
Yeah. Well, in the United States, the last time that well, not the last time, but Pluto in Capricorn right now, that's about changing our foundation. So like you just said, it's creating huge transformational shifts. I mean, like earthquake kind of shifts, because they're slow, but then they're explosive, right?
Right.
But it's, in the United States chart, we have Pluto in the second house. So that's all about our values and money, So, yeah. So I think
survival.
We're seeing,
self-survival.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
We're seeing big shifts. And one of the times when Pluto was in Capricorn was in 1776,
Yes.
Yeah. And with the American Revolution and Declaration of Independence, all of that. So that was a huge shift for that time.
Yeah. And really at that time, there was a real struggle between the states that had slaves and the states that didn't. And they needed to get everybody on board. So as politics is, as we understand just the thought of what politics means, it's compromise, which doesn't mean that everybody gets really what they want. It's sort of like, okay, you give this, but it's like, what do you really want? Well, they wanted unity. So they still allowed slavery and essentially injustice. Women couldn't even vote, for Pete's sakes. They didn't get to vote until this century. So,
I know, that's freaking crazy. So.
I know. It is. It's really crazy, especially since around the world people voted before we did. Actually, a lot of women did. That's a whole history that I was looking at. But the other thing about this chart right now is the full moon. The moon being the public, representing the public in the first house of self, and in Sagittarius, which is a sign that has opinions and belief systems and wants to express their feelings and wants the truth. I mean, all their belief systems are for the truth. It's 1 degree from what they call Philip Sedgwick, another wonderful astrologer, for anyone that wants to Google him, often talks about what's called the great attractor at 14 degrees Sagittarius. And I thought, now what is that? Because another Sagittarius point is the galactic center, which is 27 degrees. So our south nodes go in reverse. So they start at 29, which they're going to continue all the way through July 9th. So this is a heavy point. I mean, it's like boing, boing, we're staying there. But it's moving towards that 27 and in orb, a couple of degrees is even conservatively in orb. And the galactic center is where we have the black hole of the whole solar system there, and is our galactic center of energy. And the great attractor, I had to Google it, but that is where the potentialities, all potentialities exist, because Jupiter is also expansive and it has potential. And here, that means that it was so fascinating for me, if I can try to throw this out quickly, because I think that's where we're at, and that's one reason why this energy is not going to go away, which is a good thing, because it has tried to happen before, back when Pluto was squaring in attention with Uranus in the 60s. There was civil rights, and there was feminine rights, there were people rights, there was ecology rights, there was all kinds of rights, right?
Yep.
And but so it's resurfacing, because at one level it comes up, but it hasn't been resolved. But it's right next to that galactic center, which indicates all potentialities. And when we think about it, when one hears about the law of attraction, well, it's depending on the alignment of one's purpose with universe. We're getting back to evil plus, it's when one wants the generosity of love for all, how in some terms it really connects with everybody. That is, in a sense, what source is. That it's not that it's good or bad, essentially, on how it activates, but rather that essentially it's for the life of all.
Yeah.
At any rate.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I did not know that about the galactic center, or about the 1 degree off, like the 14 degree Sag, the great attractor. That's incredible. And I think it goes so in alignment. I feel like this is, we are living in powerful, powerful times. We chose to be here at this moment in history. This is going to go down in the history books as one of our hugest shifts, hopefully, towards the light, towards equality, towards, equal rights for everybody. So,
I suppose if, that when you think back on our history in the 30s, which was a horribly difficult time with the Depression and food, like, the Dust Bowl and all of that.
Right.
And the unions that got started, and I remember Arlo Guthrie, going across the train tracks, singing his songs of justice, and in other words, gathering people, the energy, the groups of people to unify. And really, the pictures here on television are much increasingly diverse than, let's say, back in 1968, when the freedom marches were, where there's intergenerational, biracial, such a unified emphasis. I was shocked here in Seattle North. There's a town called Monroe, has the penal. There's a prison there. And it's before you go over the Cascade, so a lot of people go through it. But this whole town was marching, little white faces everywhere.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think that is the huge distinction between now and the 60s. I mean, in the 60s, when Martin Luther King was around, the protests were predominantly, probably 99% people of color. Yes. And now it's a rainbow, which makes me really happy.
Yeah. And today, finally. I guess my husband, he's elsewhere during this time, but we talk daily, and he watches the news 24/7, it seems, which I'm kind of glad we're not exactly in the same house, because I am not a 24/7 TV person, but I do admire his awareness of it, because I read the paper and I'm in tune, but I'm not on that level. But he was telling me that today there was the biggest march ever at the White House.
Right, in Washington, D.C. I saw that. Yeah, and the whole thing was entirely peaceful. So
yes,
yeah, it was beautiful. Unlike some of the other, marches.
Well, progressively they're wanting to, which gets back to our presidential leadership, or that his description of leadership, because I'm not the first, and I don't want to be the last to really decry, for my sense of equality, that a peaceful protest which had been in existence was literally bombed with gas and rubber pellets for some awkward sense of publicity. It's just an absolute criminal situation. And I know I'm being very judgmental on this morally.
No, you're
but
not.
I am very, that's very disruptive. It's not in integrity. It's not with integrity of saying that we love peaceful people. So it's amazing to be able to connect and communicate, which Gemini is. Gemini is all about communication, to connect to this large group of people, the essential need to stay peaceful, like Martin Luther King.
Right.
We're going to have, I think according to my clock anyway, we have a brief break right now. And we will return. I'm speaking with June 6th with Katherine Metcalf, and we're talking about this lunar eclipse yesterday on the 5th and the USA belief systems that are transmuting for justice. And I will say, which I hadn't mentioned to my wonderful soundboard engineer here at KKNW, that our workshop is no longer going to be. I have a personal emergency. My mother is in hospice, and so the workshop that we were scheduled for the 14th and 15th will be canceled. So you might hear it, but blessings to all, and we'll be right back.
While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We are currently in the period of Gemini. By leaving a cycle based on physical form, integrated through spirit, the energy of Gemini connects spirit with matter, focused on communicating and defining the external. Gemini is a mutable air sign signifying flexibility. Gemini dually focuses upon teaching and learning in order to synthesize the world one lives within.
Hello, astrologers. This is Carlos Galvan. I am spirituality and astrology astrologer from Mexico, and you're listening to Talk Cosmos on Alternative Talk, 11:50 a.m., where we understand how to implement our free will through the cosmos.
Talk radio that will get you thinking. Alternative Talk, 1150.
Ooh, that was very good. I think David heard me and just deleted that little addition that we would have had. So we are returning. This is June 6th, and we repeat on the 11th. So Katherine, let's look at, we were speaking of Donald Trump because his chart very closely aligns with this chart you were mentioning. So let's see.
So with the lunar eclipse, so it turns out he was born on a lunar eclipse. So June 14th, 1946 is his birth date. And we have a 10:54 a.m. birth time in Jamaica, New York. So his sun is at 22 degrees Gemini, and it's actually conjunct Uranus, which explains a lot with him, how unpredictable he is and rebellious he is in general. But yeah, this lunar eclipse, and his moon, his natal moon is at 21 degrees Sag. So this lunar eclipse is conjunct his natal sun and moon. So, I mean, there's no way he's getting out of this one.
Well, that goes back and to clarify, because we have a lot of different levels of astrologer listeners here, but eclipses have significance because the light technically goes out, and even though this is a penumbral with shadows, it is saying that perhaps it could be that part of this shift, as evident of our need of on so many levels to have equality, and he is the leader at this moment, and so it is affecting him. Yeah.
his moon is in Sagittarius. His south node, which we're even talking about, is in Sagittarius. Yeah, you're right. It's very what we call a signature echo. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a big one for him. So, and so he's going to be extremely emotional, today, and he's probably very upset by the peaceful gathering that's happening outside his door. But and in his chart, this transit is affecting his fourth house, which is where it represents the home. So it's where he lives, which is in Washington, D.C. right now.
Yeah.
So, and his family and the nation.
Yep.
So, because he's in charge of that.
It's our foundation. The fourth house represents too. And the moon, the transiting moon, represents people, the public.
Right.
On one level. So the public is definitely expressing their opinions and their belief systems, wanting to let go of, to change
the
structure.
So, and, so the sun, transiting sun, is landing in his 10th house. So I do still think there's a part of him that maybe believes he's doing a great job. The 10th
nothing
house,
different there.
Right.
Sorry.
I know, like his 10th house is, it's for all of us, it's our house of career and our public reputation. But when the sun is there, it's like typically shining and you're doing well. So, that's a big and huge opposition to the moon, which is the reality right outside his door. The American people are not happy and are protesting. And
there's another part of this too, and that's the Mars. I don't know if because again and again, listening to people in the transit yesterday, and it's still Mars. They're all mutable. Just to explain to our audience, 15 degrees Gemini. Sagittarius, and the moon opposing the sun in Gemini. Mars is still in Pisces, and it's right exactly. Squaring, that means right in between them. That's 90 degrees, and it's a energy of tension that wants resolution.
Yep.
So, and it's conjunct. That means within, next door, at least from Earth as we see it, Neptune, which again has no boundaries, and it's the mystical, it's illusion, it's delusion, it's so many. And where we don't have control. And it's in the 7th house, his 7th house of others. So, and Ceres is there. I wonder, could that be like people are reclaiming their essential sense of unity? Pisces is all one. We're all in it together. There's no boundaries.
Right. And that's Mars is in Pisces. So it's like, Mars is action and energy and anger. So it's, the god of war. It's in peaceful Pisces.
Yeah.
But that's the people on the streets that have had it, with centuries of mistreatment and abuse of Black lives. And so, but they're out there peacefully, but yet he is responding to it by, tear gassing them and having, cops on horses and people shoving other people. And it's very challenging this time.
And what's really going on, and I was listening, I've been lately just listening to quite a few talks about the lunar moon. The full moon yesterday, partly because it's on my solar return too. So it was quite illuminating. It looks like I'll be living this for the next year, which is going to be quite enlightening.
Yeah. But, and I have to just interject, happy birthday today.
Oh, thank you.
Birthday today.
Oh, yes. It's been a delightful day, all in all. I must say, it's been many greetings. When is your birthday?
Mine's the 21st of May. So I'm only 3 minutes into Gemini.
Okay. So yes, the nodes and all that. Yes. Well, very good. Because in this chart, not only is Mars and I'm also thinking in reference here to Donald Trump, but Venus that just went just a few days ago with a Venus, which was conjunct, which is retrograde right now.
Retrograde,
It's retrograde, which only happens every year and a half. And if I think, and it was exactly at the same degree with the sun, meaning it's Venus star point. So here you have this energy too, that is where people are wanting their values. They want to communicate their values. It's right conjunct, like you say, his sun is North Node and Uranus, which is innovator. I mean, there's many positive things about all that if he would. But yeah, people, the women too, it's also the feminine energy, I suppose, but not, I hate to say that because everybody's got Venus and we're all receptive. And they're square each other too. I mean, the dynamics here, I agree. He has to contend with this. This is, and guess what? His Mercury, he's having a Mercury return on this. Did you see that?
Oh, wow. Oh, I do see it now. Yeah.
In the 11th house of the community of others.
Yeah.
And in nurturing Cancer, that's protective of their home. I mean, that's supporting by the moon. They're conjunct his going. Well, he's probably today's got a lunar return too, because the moon travels 13 degrees every day. Mm-hmm. So this was yesterday. That was 15 degrees, and his moon is 21. So it's probably, if we were to pull a chart right this second, he's probably having a lunar return.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. As much as I do not like that man, I do have to, as an astrologer, try to look at things with a discerning eye. And I mean, if I were looking at his chart not knowing who he was, I would say that he's got huge potential.
Yes, absolutely.
For a complete awakening, but knowing what I know about him, I think he's going to fight it. And I think he's going to go down fighting, his racist beliefs. And, I mean, we didn't even talk about Sagittarius rules justice.
Yes. And the law.
Yeah.
Jupiter rules. Yeah, Sagittarius.
Yeah. And that, all this, I mean, he's done so many things behind the scenes we're all focused on COVID, and we're all focused on, the protests for George Floyd's life, and, and all the other people who have been murdered. So, but Trump, while we're busy focusing on that, he's reversed over 100 environmental rules. So, I mean, he's stripping away.
Yeah, I think
clean water, clean air.
The true discontent, because it is so political, and usually we don't get too political, but yet it's really just to be observing that his perspective seems to be so oriented to what we're beginning to realize is attached to very old systems. We're not a nation. Yes, we have abundance, but yet to technically, like Uranus in Taurus, and forgive me for it's to me that I won't say that then, but where we just overtake the resources, like the old mythology of Gaia and Uranus I was getting at. But the point is that we need to go forward. We need to think about solar energy, other ways of correcting the harm. I mean, granted, we need economy, of course. We need some system in order to interact, and we've had a wonderful society potentially, but yet the truth is that it's not quite to the extreme that Russia was when the Tsar Nicholas and Alexandra were overtaken, but
there's inequities unbelievable, and and the earth just crying out. Here we have this pandemic, it needs attention. Hey, we were going to look at you were looking at Martin Luther King and George Floyd's death charts. Was that it?
Yeah.
And you were seeing parallels.
I was. Yeah. So, yeah. Can I just say one more thing about
Yes.
the lunar eclipse? And I think big picture, the lunar eclipse that's taking place, and we all need to be asking, we should be asking how our actions contribute to the world. So are we spreading greed and violence and intolerance and destruction of our planet? Or are we choosing peace and love and, kindness to Mother Earth? So, I think we really have a choice, and we are dealing with the karma of our ancestors, I think, right now. So it's a powerful, powerful time.
That's beautifully said. I really thank you for that.
Sure.
Can't be said enough. That's
yeah, we all have huge potential for creating a whole new world filled with peace and equality.
Wouldn't it be marvelous if we could look at people like flowers? Like it's spring, well, here in the northern hemisphere, I have this gorgeous bouquet a friend gave me, and they're different colors. People are different colors.
Right.
What's the difference,
Right.
I mean, it makes all kinds of sense. It's like, just enjoy if one is red or brown or yellow
Right.
or tan or whatever,
Absolutely. I'm there with you, sister.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, well, Martin Luther King, God bless him, was assassinated on April 4th, 1968 at 6:01 p.m. in Memphis, Tennessee. And just an interesting chart in and of itself. I mean, I looked at I just did the chart, the death chart, basically. I didn't do any transits. I just did, that moment. So it was interesting when I did George Floyd's chart too, who was, as we know, murdered on May 25th, 2020. Both have their sun on the descendant, which I thought was interesting. And both have the moon in Cancer. And both have Venus conjunct Mercury.
Wow.
So when I
in
looked
Gemini,
at that,
is that what you said too? In Gemini?
I didn't. Let me look.
I thought you said Venus was conjunct
Mercury. Yeah, in Gemini.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So Martin Luther King had Venus conjunct Mercury in his 6th house, and when he was murdered, he was basically, going to work. He was doing a speech. And then Venus, Mercury was also opposing Uranus and Pluto in his chart, which can point to the unexpected, shooting. And he also had Pluto conjunct Uranus in his 12th house. So like, an upsetting, a horrible loss, but potential to shift, old held racial beliefs. So, and then George Floyd, I think the fact that they both have the sun on the descendant is like other people are learning from their sacrifice.
The illumination, yes,
Yeah.
of their identity, their not just identity, but their will, their entire being, because the sun does embody everything, and it illuminates. It's the sun. It's leadership.
Right. And George, in his chart, he has that Venus Mercury conjunction in his 7th house of partnerships. I don't know if he was with, a partner at the time of his death. I know there was somebody else in his car or was with him in the car, but I haven't heard details on that. And then he had the sun square Mars, which when that happens, it can, that can be a violent aspect.
Separation, yes. Mars
Yeah.
is separation because it's action.
Yeah.
It goes forward. It separates.
Yeah. And then lastly, he had Pluto conjunct Jupiter in the second house of the death chart. And I wrote and Saturn. So that must have been conjunct. I don't know. But I thought it was interesting in the second house that, they basically called the police on him because of counterfeit check or money.
The financial part. Yes.
Yeah, the financial part.
And some ethic. I mean, Saturn can be ethic. There's so many ways to look at it, which, again, though, it's not that somebody did right or wrong, but what's the penalty? My God, to get killed for something that goes back to Dickens, Charles Dickens. I think to myself of Tale of Two. Hey, there you go, Tale of Two Cities.
There's the twins again.
Yeah, and it's like in 1600s or whatever, when things were so. I think it was the 1600s that Charles Dickens wrote that, but I'm not quite sure. My history kind of gets lost about that. But, people got their hands cut off for stealing bread. And I mean, we're supposed to be civilized in the sense that we understand that people need correction. They need to be, certain actions need to be stopped, but it's the manner in which we do it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I felt like when I looked at these two charts, both of these men are pivotal in, globally, I think, in our opinion about races and the prejudice that has taken place for so long. And I think they both chose to be, that's my personal belief, but I think they both chose to be these harbingers of change.
Iconic symbols. Representing the need, and George Floyd again and again was spoken of his gentleness, and what stuck in my mind was a gentle giant.
Yes.
I thought, oh my goodness, for whatever purpose, this man had a heart, and people loved him. The people he worked with, and so one does in astrology try to observe things from a distance. It's always that pull of the emotional, because right now in a full moon, moons are emotional. It is our emotions. Sure. We have, that's part of us. We have to honor it, but yet too, we try to understand it. And it's in Sagittarius. So of course we want to understand. And I thought often too with the nodes, because this is the first eclipse, we have the solar eclipse coming that is pivotal.
On the solstice.
Yeah, squaring the galactic center, as Gemini Brett brings up. And then we have another one on the 4th of July, I think. I've seen the 5th. Yes. But it might be kind of late, and depending, it depends, what time it is.
It's at 12:44 p.m. in the United States. Well, in New York. Yeah.
Yeah, so depending on where you are in the country, it's the 4th or 5th. But because it's associated with our nodal system of this energy, which evolutionary astrology certainly looks upon as our soul growth, and for whatever other, it's not just that. I think Vedic many astrologers look at the nodes in different ways, but I was thinking about learning. Gemini is so much about learning, and the depths of how we learn it seems to me is going to take such huge new forms of context. Now that we're in this coronavirus where the world has just shrunk to a mutual experience. It's maybe perhaps because Neptune with Pisces dissolves the borders, and there's all this rationale associated with it, whether how we've treated the world and whatnot, but
we're learning in new ways.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. So even though we're separated because of COVID, we are connecting online, which is Uranus, so yeah. So there's still a thread there.
And it must be the need to connect. I was thinking maybe that's with the moon right now, because the moon needs emotion. It needs, if we just look at the fact that
it was brought up that it changes through the phases and it needs more light or it needs more dark, however it goes. But I know that this year, like for our birthday, I had all kinds of people connecting with me that were like, "Oh my goodness, this is wonderful." But I think
That's so nice.
yeah, but I think it gets back to this need to connect, which is again Gemini.
Right.
Gemini, it was like the twins. They needed to connect, like the brother reaching down under the earth, saying, "No, we're staying together. I'm not letting go of him just because he died," which is so symbolic right now. It's like, no, they may be gone. Just like you said, that sun is in the 7th, and by gosh, we're gonna live their life in some kind of destiny. We're letting its purpose shine and give strength to a better world, a better sense of something.
Yeah. And I feel like, I know we're coming to the end of the talk, but I just wanted to say that I know there's a lot of people, listening out there that have lost hope, that are overwhelmed. And, I do believe that there's a better time coming. It's, we are in pivotal, powerful, historic times, but we chose to be here. And I want to remind everybody that you are strong enough to endure this, and you're here for a reason. You're here to be a change maker. So
it comes up that I'm so glad you brought this in, because it comes up again and again, and it needs to be said, because we're reinventing ourselves. I take classes again from another astrologer, Maurice Fernandez, and I just listened to a video that he's free to share wherever, and he was bringing up this point, which I'm so glad, and it parallels supports what you're saying, is that to take action in any manner that we choose, but this is a time of knowing that of the shift. Yes, it's not easy. That's one thing. It's not easy, but I think language itself is getting ramification. We're bringing in more instinct, more sense of unity. I sure hope so.
Yeah.
Next week, I'll take this brief moment. Next week will be Planet Buzz with Dr. Laura Tad and myself, and we're talking about Mercury retrograde. Yes, we're having another retrograde, but it's a rewind time. So, and it'll be in Cancer, and we'll discuss that. So tonight, this is June 6th with Talk Cosmos for the lunar eclipse and the USA transmuting its beliefs on justice. And Katherine Metcalf from Illinois is with me, and you can find her at katherinemetcalf.com or go to Talk Cosmos, and you can certainly subscribe. So, and this is also being repeated on the 11th in the morning. So we have how many minutes? We have a few minutes, about 2 minutes, so we can, with that.
Can I just say too that you can go to your website and you can listen to any of your recordings at any time.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So I sent out a invite, today, and I had a few people say, "Oh my gosh, I can't listen. Is it going to be recorded?" So I just wanted to let people know that they can go to your website or to Talk Cosmos website anytime and listen to any of the recordings. Yeah.
In fact, the radio station puts them on podcast 1, but any podcast just about will replay them. So again, you can go to Talk Cosmos, and I have a link there that by clicking it pulls you right into all of them ever since the very first one over 2 years ago, because we're in the 3rd season. That's very true.
That's awesome. And there's so much going on right now that it's important for people to tune in. And especially if they're feeling lost or confused or whatever, listening to astrological discussions, and you have so many great experts on, it's good for the soul.
Oh, thank you. Yes, indeed. Yes. And we're in a time of bridging curiosity and learning of other cultures, and the mind heart for greater understanding. It really is
powerful. And so I think too, getting through our emotions, sometimes the confusion can be just not knowing how one feels. So it is very important what you're saying. We have about half a minute here, and then we'll have to close with that lovely music in the background that David helped cue us.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Sue. I so appreciate being your chosen one on your birthday, girl.
Well, indeed, I so much enjoy how you bring in the historical essences, because this is important to realize the connection, because we are connecting. All right, Catherine, we shall see. Well, somehow we'll see you in form, spirit, however.
Thank you, Sue. I appreciate it.
Blessings to all.
Thank you for listening to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Be sure to tune in next Saturday at 6 p.m. to continue finding your roots in the stars.